You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, November 21st, 2024 at 7:58 p.m. Pacific time. And I thought that I would talk about the importance of actually identifying your attachment strategy, and then also how different attachment strategies relate to the way that they fit into our culture and how that may affect your um, the desirability of the attachment strategy that you have. And it's pretty simple. The main reason you want to identify your attachment strategy is because the interventions differ for each of the different attachment strategies, and that if you use an intervention for an attachment strategy that it's not indicated for, it doesn't have much impact on changing the attachment strategy. So secure people really are the focus for them if they have features is helping them to negotiate secure functioning relationships and also to help them navigate primary exploration so that they're engaged in enough of a meaningful life. With dismissing people, what really the main focus is on is showing up and being present for them and interested in them, because the experience of their early childhood was one of profound neglect, uh, that you provide the opposite of that, that you're actually engaging with them, you're actually present for them, you're not going to abandon them. Preoccupied people, the main cause of preoccupation is enmeshment. And so if you were to use a strategy for a dismissing person, that you were constantly present, constantly available, never going to abandon them, it's experienced as an enmeshment attempt by a preoccupied person, and is really rejected usually most of the time. And so what you really need in terms of a preoccupied person is to turn the attention backward toward your own feeling state, out of the mind state of the uh, caregiver. And disorganized people, the fearfulness is the thing that needs to be addressed primarily in the beginning. The anticipation of betrayal, the anticipation of harm that's going to come, the necessity for a hypervigilant stance, waiting for the other shoe to drop, and that not happening. So constant comforting, constant soothing, and an absolutely uh, perfect record of non-harming, which is necessary. Um, so that's one of the things that I think is essential. And without an assessment, it's hard to know what that's going to be. Because there is a cultural relationship to the different attachment strategies, we can misidentify our attachment strategy, or actually have a preference for a different one than we have, because it appears to us to be more culturally important. So, for instance, in the Western cinematic iconography, the dismissing man is like the top of the food chain. Clint Eastwood was the one in my childhood, Hang 'em High, or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the loner, amazingly capable gunman with a deep ethical sense of righteousness that engages in the world, saving the weak, preoccupied person, who is usually the female. There is no sex correlation between attachment strategies. So there's many dismissing females as there are dismissing males. There's many preoccupied males as there are preoccupied female. So what happens if you're a dismissing female and that's identified as masculine in our culture? And there's tremendous pressure at the moment on gender identification. I think part of it is that this understanding that these bundles of characteristics that we divide into male and female are widely distributed in both sexes. And so what it creates is a need for suppression in each of the sexes around, characteristics that have always been present and are not really controllable, and also shouldn't be identified as one sex or another because, or one gender or as another, because that isn't actually an accurate representation of it. What happens if you're a preoccupied man and you identify that as feminine, and then you're suddenly in a place of questioning your masculinity, which we see quite a bit in men's groups, which I hilariously to myself think, but I'll let you in on it, is that it's a couple of dismissing guys who are trying to teach a gaggle of preoccupied guys how to be dismissing so that they'll feel masculine. Uh, it's fairly hilarious when you think about it, because Mudit.
Yes, could you elaborate more on this? I see this more and more on my Facebook advertising me to
Well,
sign up for. I'm maybe confusing confidence, the idea of confidence. Maybe I'm just mixing that with dismissiveness.
well, confidence would be something associated with dismissing people, right? Confident, assertive. And helplessness would be something associated with the feminine, right? Preoccupation.
Exactly.
So that's kind of it. So you have a couple of dismissing guys or a couple of preoccupied guys who've learned to pretend to be dismissing guys, who offer the path of exploration. So it's more likely a dismissing person. They offer a group of men who don't explore well, so they can't figure it out on their own, mainly because they're preoccupied, a pathway to engage in masculine behavior. But what is also missed, I think, quite a bit is that it activates the pretend mode of the preoccupied person. And so they don't actually discover ways to be expressive of their masculinity or touch into it particularly. What they learn is to pretend to be a certain way. So it creates these rather rigid, role-bound behaviors. Christian?
I think like it probably still exists, but like in the 2000s, there was like a whole thing of like seduction and like pickup artists and stuff like that. And like it's like teaching you how to like play women like a video game or like make fun of them or do all these things and wear like fuzzy hats and like to not be yourself. Like I think
Over them.
that's like the preoccupied person wants the rules of the game so that they don't have to actually like figure out what they want.
But all of those things are not universal, right? um, if you learn a series of strategies that you can use to prey on people, right, so that you become a predator, it may appear to you that your skill set is really working, but it only works on a subset of people that are responsive to that kind of predation, um, and largely in the disorganized set of people, I would think, mainly because they become passive in response to it, which is how it really works. So you're taught to be the pickup artist, as my friend way back in the 70s said as I was complaining that I was not getting adequate response from people. He said, if you are not turned down cold 10 times a night, you can't really consider yourself as trying. So,
Wait, so what do you think about that?
well, what I think about that is that you're not going for people you're interested in. You're going for everybody, and you just hit on everybody. And the people that don't deflect it immediately are the ones that you end up pursuing. So there's really little direction in it in terms of your own interest in people. And it's really a mechanism of who's passive or not.
I see.
It's the factory farming method of dating.
Well, you just hit on everybody. The statistic is that someone who is raped is 9 times more likely to be raped twice than somebody who isn't susceptible to rape, because people who fight back are raped less often than people who become passive and compliant. But that conditioning of childhood that puts you in that position, obviously there's no responsibility for encountering a predator and being overpowered by them. But you often get the sense when that kind of forward pressure causes the reaction of passivity, that there's a target on your back, but there's no special radar that the pickup artist uses. They just hit on everybody. And then the people who don't push back on it are the ones that they pursue.
I think there's one good thing or subset of the, I don't know, I don't want to call them pickup artists because I think they're different. Because I think what I feel is that sense of rejection is kind of getting you, almost like getting rejected again is getting you closer to that, getting comfortable with rejection. So it increases your social capacity.
Your capacity.
From that point of view, I thought it's a great thing that if I'm just approaching people not to pick them up, but just to get out of my comfort zone.
But if you flip it from the point of view, which is the orientation toward rejection of will they want me, will they accept me, to will I accept them, am I actually interested? And that's then pushing you into the sense of confidence. I'm looking across the room, I'm looking at you, you seem to be offering things that I think would be interesting. Let me go investigate whether I'm actually interested in you or not of whether I'll be acceptable to you, which is more the orientation around the anticipation of rejection. But it also defeats the pretend mode thing. If you're constantly concerned about whether you'll be likable or not, you abandon your authentic expression in terms of what you think they might want from you, so that you can be likable to them, that they'll want you. But then you're in this bind of having to pretend to be the person that they liked, not whether you liked them. And in presenting yourself authentically, do they value you and want to get to know you? I think that often in the pretend mode, of course, after a while, it does become unbearable because you feel so unseen in the relationship, and then you want to do the big reveal where you tell them that actually this is who I am, not the person I've been pretending to be so that you would like me. But that really undermines most relationships rather than increases the intimacy, because the other person couldn't tell that you were lying to them the whole time, and now you're telling them that suddenly you're someone else and this is your real self, but they can't believe you because they believed you the last time you presented a version of yourself to them. So the idea then is to come to a place where you can recognize what your authentic response is and present it. And in presenting it, see whether there's something possible there. which means you could or could not find something. Would it?
I feel this is also related with the lack of mentality. I think that's culturally so important. Like it's so deep in, I don't know, maybe just Indian culture, but it's very deep in the sense that you're not going in with oh, there's many options. No, you don't feel that way. You feel there's very limited options, and that tends to put you in a state lower than the
Right. You know, male arousal is dependent on a couple of things. Well, three things mainly. One is there's a sense of safety, that there has to be some sense of power, depending on how your conditioning went. Can you be in a relationship where the power balance is pretty equal, or do you need to have a lot more power in order to feel a sense of safety? And for a lot of men, the power differential is huge. That's what they require in order to feel a sense of safety. And then the second one is, does the person appear to be turned on by you? And so that, depending on how good you are at detecting authenticity, you could just get a performance, which might be enough. And then the third one is how hot does your male cohort of friends think the person that you're getting is, right? Are they of a high social value to your male cohort? Christian.
George, what happened to how hot do you think this person is?
That is an interesting conundrum, because if you, what happens when the person that really arouses you is not considered attractive in our culture? And how do you navigate that with your social circle? Because the social circle piece is pretty important, coming, you know, up from the tribal. We're not obviously tribal anymore, but at least in the West, but those origins. And it would be nearly impossible in our culture to avoid the constant emphasis on what is attractive or what is meant to be attractive. And then what happens when what is attractive to you doesn't line up very well with the cultural standards of attractiveness? How do you navigate that? You forego that reinforcement from your social circle, or do you keep it a secret?
especially like homosexuality in Indian culture.
Oh,
It's like an
yeah.
impossible thing. People just leave.
They leave.
They leave their families. I have my sister's friend, best friend, two brothers, one sister. One by one, they all came out to be gay. And my family was so shocked in all that they couldn't believe. And she was my sister's best friend since college, and she never knew.
Huh. Oh, because it had to be hidden.
What?
It had to be hidden.
Yes. And it was came out until they were in their 30s. Nobody didn't tell their parents. And their parents were, I think, not very accepting of the
No.
situation.
You know, I came out when I was 19, so that would have been the 70s. And yeah, no, but usually to come out meant you had to get a new family and all new friends. That's what it meant. And so people didn't do it very often, and it was not common, but it was often you would couple with somebody else who was gay, and you could put on the front, or you just had somebody who showed up at family events. We use the word beard to you brought your beard, so everybody would assume that you were heterosexual. My girlfriend all through college, high school was a lesbian. In fact, 7 of the women I dated in high school ended up being lesbians. So it was easy. It worked too.
How many women did you date in high school? It begs the question.
Oh, um, I was quite promiscuous when I was young, so quite a few. Um,
Yeah, if you've seen your pictures, you look very, very handsome.
I'm just messing with you. That's funny. It's like 7 of them.
Yeah, that's
That was a lot more than I ever dated.
in my life.
yeah, that's the numbers uh, 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 of men my age are in the thousands usually in terms of encounters, which is just part of that pre-AIDS world. I think it's probably true now too because PrEP, but so understanding that the other thing is because attachment conditioning is complex and you present in you show up in relationships with your attachment conditioning uh, and other people show up with their attachment conditioning and you mix an attachment relationship that's unique to the pairing of the two attachment systems and the reflection of what your actual attachment strategy is can vary quite a bit. Let's say that you're a dismissing person, but you see some value to a relationship, and you form a relationship with somebody who's really hardcore, no value to a relationship, no feeling. You can appear to be quite preoccupied in that relationship, even though your go-to strategies are both dismissing. Or you could appear in a relationship where you're the dismissing one and you're in relationship to a preoccupied person, and it's perfectly evident that you're the dismissing person or they're the preoccupied person, or you two preoccupied person, the person that's more extreme in the preoccupation is going to look like the preoccupied person, and the other person is going to look more dismissing in terms of how they present. I worked for a long time with a couple, and typical hetero couple, a man and a woman. The couple thought that the man in the relationship was dismissing, and they thought that the woman was preoccupied, and they both thought that was how it was, that she was preoccupied. That's how she identified, and he was dismissing, and that's how they identified. And we did the AAI, and it was the reverse. He was the preoccupied one, and she was the dismissing one. Her reaction to being the dismissing one was, yes, how awesome is that? His reaction to being the preoccupied one was, I want to take the test again.
That
But
confirms
what?
my dismissiveness.
What?
That confirms my dismissiveness because that's exactly what I said. It's taken.
So, but then when I switched the interventions, uh, they made rapid progress, whereas they weren't making much headway the other way. And then in the individual work, they also progressed quite quickly, whereas that had also not been very fruitful. So the appearance of it, and then we also have the way that it's embedding into our culture, which is these colloquial understandings of what attachment conditioning is. And usually in that, it's assigned to specific behaviors, right? If you do this, that means you're preoccupied. If you do that, that means you're dismissing. And that actually isn't how it works at all. It's the intention for the action and what you're attempting to get out of it. And any of the attachment strategies could take any of the actions, and that would not be indicative of what is the underlying attachment strategy. So, as an example, you show up at a hotel, you're secure, the hotel does not have the reservation that you made, and they offer you a different but comparable room, and you accept it. There's some anger that's expressed that they didn't keep the reservation, but a comparable setup would, while inconvenient, be acceptable. But the anger is really about the situation. When there's an offer of competence that is useful, the anger settles. The dismissing person comes in, they rage that the room that they ordered isn't what they wanted, but they're raging because their sense of self has been compromised. It's not about the situation of not having the room. It's about not being valued, not being seen as who they are and their importance. And so a room of comparable value would not be acceptable. They would need they would need an upgrade in order for them to feel settled. And if they were given an upgrade, that would reaffirm that they were all that, and that would be okay. A preoccupied person would express anger, probably need to see the room and reject room after room after room in order to keep the conflict going, because the conflict was giving them the proximity and attention that matters so much to them. And a disorganized person might erupt in anger at feeling unseen and then not accept an alternative and leave because of the distress of it. All three of these would be a presentation of an angry response to disappointment, but the motivation underneath the anger is really what's expressive of the attachment conditioning and not the anger expression. Makes sense more? Would it?
So a dismissive person is not, because we in society we think dismissive person is somebody who doesn't express too much or doesn't express anything in general. Isn't that the image that we have?
Well, there's a whole spectrum of dismissing quality, but no, what you really expect from a dismissing person is an oscillation between seduction and bullying. So the derogating anger is one option, and the idealization is another option. And there is one group of dismissing people that don't use idealization. They only use bullying. They only use derogation, only use bullying. But what you'll notice with a dismissing person is if the anger doesn't get them the upgrade, then they flip, like turn on a dime into the seduction mode to get it.
Putting their
And
tone,
yeah,
their body language and their tone and everything, smiling and all that. Okay.
right. And then derogating anger, it's not always hot, anger. Anger can be cold. So, for instance, if I'm giving the adult attachment interview to somebody who's a dismissing person who uses derogation mostly, but doesn't really have much in the way of idealization, I'll ask a question that they don't want to answer. And they'll say, "What idiot thought this question up? It's so stupid. I'm not going to answer it." But there's no heat in that. It's just totally dismissing. What idiot thought up this question? Now, the reason that they're saying what idiot thought up this question is not because they think the question is stupid, it's because they don't want to answer it. So they don't. But they don't say this is too sensitive an issue for me, and I'm too shameful or too embarrassed about the answer to this question, so I'm not going to answer it. That making sense? Christian.
George, I find it interesting that from the anecdote you shared about the woman in the couple that you were working with and being happy about testing dismissing, because I would think that my interpretation from seeing the sort of pop psych landscape of like online discourse around attachment is like there's so much piling on to dismissives. Like there's
Right.
that like you almost wouldn't want to call yourself dismissive.
Well, there is piling on, but there also, you know, that Hollywood iconography of, you know, the stoic, masculine, powerful male figure is very appealing. You know, the cowboy rides off in the sunset to be alone, and the woman is leaning against the door frames, you know, silently weeping that he's leaving. Which one would you rather be?
I like a good weep myself.
um, yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. I, of course, am a non-binary person, and so I think that the spectrum of expression should be free from one end to the other, right? So cisgender to trans in one spectrum of masculinity, and cisgender to trans in one spectrum of femininity is more my experience of it. Or uh, if you're in your 20s, perfect androgyny probably could still work. the
Why just in your 20s?
well, there's a kind of magical quality, I think, image wise, that aging takes. So.
Yeah, that makes sense on second thought.
uh, some sense of innocence left, maybe, or maybe I'm just a romantic. Who knows? The I was looking at a woman's photographic work today, actually, and she dozens of these pictures of perfect androgyny, which I hadn't seen in quite a long time, which I quite like. Which is she's Chinese, and was photographing Chinese kids coming up in the culture they're in. You know, we have it now here too in a different way. We have in the West, or in particularly in the United States, we tend to pathologize everything and need to correct everything. And the rigidness of our hetero-binary is to me appalling. That you can't just represent as you are. You have to have surgical interventions, and which I wonder about.
Because I know there's some talk about this different sexes coming up, especially in North Bay near Berkeley. There's like a huge uptick in all kinds of like these genders.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't think that's something to do with their upbringing? There was a theory that the World War II or that time affected the mothers taking care of the kids, and the fathers were not there taking care of. That affected the outcome of how masculine and feminine the next generation is.
Well, during World War II, when all of the men went to war, all of the women just took over the men's job, did them fine. There's no problem. There was nothing about the job that had been traditionally assigned to a male that made the job necessarily male, and women just went and they went into the factories, they built planes, boats, all of it. And then when the men came back from war and were unemployed, they just pushed the women out of the economy into that sort of ideal 50s idea of what was feminine and masculine. And the economy was booming in that period when we had to rebuild everything. We blew up. But none of that had to do with capability. It had to do with the larger economic needs. And then all of that has been stripped away.
So these intermediate genders are not a result of attachment problems, conditioning.
Well,
But
I think that also if there was no restriction, there was no immense pressure for a binary solution to people's gender representations, what would they do? If you were completely free to do whatever you want and all of those choices were equally rewarded, where would you end up? I don't think we have a way of knowing that. I do think that the conundrum around homosexuality was strangely affected by AIDS, in the sense that all of those good, upstanding families whose kids got sick could no longer deny the fact that their kids were gay. And when they experienced these good, upright citizens who paid their taxes and paid their health insurance were subjected to the prejudice of their kids in the hospital when they were dying, the emotional cost of that was too great. And they simply would not tolerate that for their children. And this is particularly the World War II generation who served their countries and could not bear the fact that their children were being subjected to this awful oppression and prejudice and dying because of it horribly when they were such upstanding citizens, and they refused to accept it anymore. And that's actually the thing that changed that. And then you have each generation pushing against the restrictions of the generation ahead of them. And I think for the kids that are coming up now, the rigidity of that hetero binary is too much. I don't want to do it. And so they're protesting, much in the way that we grew our hair in the 60s and wore bell bottoms. A male wearing bell bottom jeans in the 60s was completely outrageous. And you may not know that, and you were called feminine, which was nearly as derogatory as you could get. Not being heterosexual was worse. Still. But then we get into this whole cultural thing, and how does one reinforce the rigidity of the binary? The way that you do it is by invalidating the biological sex component and making it gender. I don't really agree with. I know it is part of the outgrowth of the postmodernism. A lot of the postmodern ideas, philosophically, it doesn't line up for me. You want to do 10 minutes or 15 minutes of meditation? No. So go ahead and settle in. Right, let go of the meditation. So most of our programs have already started for the year, but we do have one event in December. I'm going to talk about my photography at length for 3 hours. I think that's December 14th, and it's free to people who are subscribing to the magazine that I have called Place, which you can subscribe to on the website, or you can just subscribe and come, or you can not subscribe and come. It's up to you. It comes out twice a year. And the next issue is going to be released on December 15th, so the workshop is on the 14th. And then in January, we're going to do a level 1 on the 4 Saturdays in January, and begin our schedule of level 1s and level 2s. We are going to offer the addiction cycle, both level 1 and level 2 of the addiction course coming up. And we're also going to start a track just for helping professionals who are interested in learning more about this stuff. And that's what's coming up in the new year. Thanks for your practice. If you'd like to make a donation, you can by going to the website. It's appreciated in any amount. It helps support me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. But if you don't have resources, that's also fine. We're happy to have you come practice. Thank you. We're not going to do a talk on Thanksgiving, which is next week, but we'll be back the week after. I know.
Thanks so much, George. Good to see you all.